Hello, my loves, and welcome back to another episode of Expansion Season. I am so excited to be here with you. And at the time of this recording, I don't know exactly when this is going to roll out, but at the time of this recording, we are nearing the end of the year. And so at the end of the year, I take myself and my clients through this really thorough process of reflecting and celebrating and mining my experiences of the previous year for essentially the gold. And some of that comes through the wins and the big accomplishments. Often it comes through the challenges and the crazy making things and those types of lessons. And also, I've been able to look at what this year has brought up for me, what it's shown me, what it's revealed, what I've learned. And I've started to craft a really simple but clear plan for the year ahead. And so we're going to kind of pull back the curtain. I'm going to get really vulnerable with you today. And my deepest desire and intention is that this inspires you. If you have not taken the time to pause and reflect, if that's not something that is part of your daily, weekly, monthly, or annual practices, I want to invite you to take that on because it can be a total game changer. And it also really helps to inform what's going to serve you and support you best and most as you move forward. So I'm going to bring up my notes here to keep us relatively on track. If you've ever rolled with me before, we have notes and then we'll kind of go rogue here and there. So I want to start with my word for the year. I'm totally in the camp of people who love to choose a word or a theme for the year. I am surrounded by a lot of women who like to do that. And some people, that's not their jam. So if you don't like choosing a word or a theme, sometimes I'll refer to it as your North Star for the year. That's totally fine. You could still be wildly successful and happy and fulfilled and all the things you want. But I find that having a word or a theme, something to come back to, really helps me come back to center, come back to home, refocus around what's important. And so my word for 2024 was a really interesting word. I was talking to my husband about this yesterday. He knows I do this, and he didn't even know that this was my word because I didn't talk about it a ton with him. But it is a spiritual, even you can go as far as calling it a biblical word, but it's the word Kairos, which is a spiritual word that refers to a certain kind of time. And I chose this word, I'll tell you a little bit more about in a second, but I chose this word because prior to having kids, I felt like somebody, I mean, doesn't everybody? Probably not. I felt like somebody who had a really good handle on my life and my schedule and my time. And right now, if you don't know, I'm a mom of three. I have an 11-year-old, a 9-year-old, and an almost 3-year-old. So we're touching at like a couple of different kind of big monumental phases of motherhood at these different ages. And I feel like with every child that I added to my family roster, my relationship with time, if I'm being completely honest, decreased. It declined. I started to feel like things were slipping through my fingertips. I started to feel like I was getting to the end of every day, not feeling accomplished, not knowing what I had done, feeling like there was never enough time. And that when you are in a perpetual state of time scarcity, even as I'm talking about it right now, I'm getting this feeling around my neck like I'm suffocating. Like that can be a really heavy experience to sit under. That can carry quite a burden. And that was my experience of it. So going into 2024, I knew I wanted to have a new relationship with time. And I was actually sitting in a church service. It was December 31st of last year. I had not chosen a word or a theme, and I sat down in the front row with my notebook because that's how I go to anything, whether it's a class, an online workshop, or a sermon in a building known as a church. And so I sat down, and instantly the pastor came out and he started talking about time, and he started talking about the new year and January 1st and how there are so many things, energetically that are really fun and special about it. But in the big scheme of things, January 1st doesn't actually matter. Like your higher self, God's spirit, your intuition, it's just another day. And there are two different types of time when we're speaking from a spiritual lens. And he talked about the first one. He said there's one is Chronos. So Chronos time is what most of us live by. Chronos time is minutes and hours and days and months and linear and calendars. And that was really what was creating a lot of this heaviness that I was feeling around time. And before he said it, the word dropped in. I said, next, after he talks about Chronos time, he's going to talk about Kairos. I'd heard this word before and I forgot about it. And then he moved and he said, and then there's Kairos time, which means the opportune time, the right time, the perfect time. Ultimately, it means God's time. And God doesn't care about the minutes and the days and the hours. And I thought, oh my gosh, if I could live my life not so worried about my schedule, but more fixed and focused on what God has in store for me. Wow, that feels truly expansive. And so that was my theme for the year. And that was the thing that I had to come back to. And that was the thing that also like picked me up in moments when the old patterns of time scarcity started to come through. And I share this with you because when I look at 2024, that really shaped a lot of it. So I want to share some highlights with you. Again, really pulling back the layers and getting relatively transparent and vulnerable with you. So one of the really big highlights, this is not the end all be all, but this is something that as we were making it through the year, which was 2024 was one of the more challenging years I've ever experienced as an adult and probably in my life. And so I was starting to notice that although 2024 didn't necessarily feel the best in my internal and external landscape. I feel like there was more mental health stuff, more emotional stuff to navigate. If you're not aware of this, my family and I made a really big move. Like 16 months ago. And so last year was our first full year in our new home and in our new town. And this move also, part of it was I was moving away from my support system, my mom, who's my best friend, my closest family and friends. And of course, like logically, that would take a toll on someone to an extent. But I had no idea the extent that this was going to tax my mind, my heart, my spirit. It was one of the defining pieces of this year was figuring out how to live without that support system, without my village, and even still just being 2 years postpartum. And so that put a little bit of honestly what I want to call a cloud over 2024. Yet there were so many beautiful things that happened. And one of those things was inside of my business, Dani Kenney Coaching, which I refer to as DKC. I feel like this is shocking, but God is probably laughing at me because God does the impossible. So I've been in business for 12 years, and this past year was our second highest revenue year, which I feel like is huge because leaning back on what I just shared, because of I feel like turmoil is a really big word to use, but I also feel like it's an accurate word to use. The mental, emotional, spiritual, and energetic turmoil I was trying to navigate through that I was not expecting. I worked a lot less last year than I ever had, like than I have in the last previous years. I did fewer launches. So as a service-based business, my coaching brand and business relies heavily on me actively launching, whether it's doing a live event or hosting workshops or talking about what I do on social media. I did dramatically less of that last year than I have in the last 5 to 6 years. Yet the income and impact results were exponential. And so that was one of those things where I think that I learned, especially leaning in Kairos, I didn't have to move a million miles a minute to make a difference in my life and in the lives of others. I really got to lean into my design, the way that God designed me, but also my human design. That made a world of a difference for me. And yeah, just coming back to not being so worried about what everyone else was doing, not being so worried about moving faster year after year. So, really being able to slow down and focus on me and rest more and reevaluate my priorities, but still having record-breaking results was really, really eye-opening. And I'm really grateful for that. So, I'm going to be taking that into the new year ahead. So that's where the Kairos piece comes back into my word for the year, how it really shaped everything. So, that being said, heading into the year ahead, this feels exciting. Some of my people know this. This is the first time that I am probably in like 13 or 14 years that I'm not choosing a word per se, but I'm choosing a theme. It's two words, and it is own it. Own it. Own it. So when you hear that, I'm curious what comes up for you. But there's this thing that I do that is not cute and it is not helpful at all. And that is this, I don't do it intentionally. It's this unintentional subconscious pattern of downplaying, downplaying my gifts, my expertise, my story, my experiences, the value that I bring. And I feel like there's this piece of me, and this is such a normal and natural thing to do. But again, it's not cute. It is not helpful. It is not serving anyone. There's this piece of me that has struggled being seen in my bigness because I'm afraid that it's going to make other people feel not enough, or it's going to make them feel uncomfortable, or it's going to trigger them in some way, shape, or form. Let me know if you can relate to that. And I think that this is something that I've consciously worked on, I've dabbled in, but it's never really been a priority. And I'm at the point now where I feel like in some ways, my growth as a person, as a woman, as a leader, as a business owner has honestly, although I'm very proud of my growth and proud of success, whatever that means to you, I've created some really extraordinary things that I'm truly proud of. I feel like there's been this plateau that's been happening over the last few years, and it's because I have not been truly owning my gifts, what I'm here to do. And there's so many ways that I'm ready to step into that. And it feels really good and empowering to say. It also feels, honestly, I'm gonna like put my arms out to hold myself in this position. It feels really stretchy. And I know that I'm gonna bump up against quite a bit of discomfort because there's gonna be moments where I will feel inclined to shrink a little bit based on what's happening around me or who I'm with or how I am afraid I might be perceived. But I am at this breaking point where I know that continuing that way, continuing to move forward in my personal and professional life that way is is not an option. It is not an option anymore. So, taking this theme, taking the lessons that I've learned from this past year, I want to share with you the things that I'm planning on doing that are going to support me with this either directly or indirectly. And this is not an exhaustive list. I'm sure there's more things, but as I was preparing for today, these are the things that were flowing through, and they're not in any particular order. I think that they're all really important, but I'm just going to kind of go down the list in the way that they were coming through to me. So, one thing I'm going to do is I am going to be way more intentional with my time. Again, although the Kairos year is complete, there's this piece around understanding the power of the time that we have and the gift that every moment is, and being really intentional and mindful about where we're investing our time and our energy. This is something that I feel like I've been improving on a little bit. I didn't start off the year very strong with this, but as we got closer to the end of the year, I'm feeling really good. But this is something that I want to continue to fuel. So, a few ways that I'm going to be doing this is there's a couple of apps that I have found. One of them is an app called the Timelines Tracker. And Timelines is a really fun way to almost gamify your day. And how you're spending your time. And so I created several different categories. I'm going to be referencing my phone a couple of different times today just to walk you through these. So, for instance, inside of my business, there's four different categories. There's me tracking when I'm working behind the scenes with the DKC brand, there's when I'm working with my clients. There is DKC learning. So I am always investing in myself. I'm always wanting to learn more. That's something I'm prioritizing. And then also inside of my business is time for creation. I feel like when you have a brand and a business in the way that I do, but even if you have a brick and mortar, in the day and age that we live in, creating content is for some of you it's not going to be as important, or I mean it is important, but you're probably not going to need to spend as much time as others. But making sure that you're creating things that really embody the values of your brand and inform your people what you're doing and how you can serve them. It really doesn't matter what kind of business you lead. It's important that you're doing that. So that's a really big part of it. I also have movement, personal care when I'm taking care of myself. This is like when I get up in the morning and I'm doing, my makeup and brushing my hair and doing things around the house for myself, making my cup of coffee. And also in the evening, I have a separate category for self-love. This is when I'm doing my journaling and my reading and sitting in my sauna. I have home tasks, family time, quality time with my family. I have mom life while I'm on the go. I learned that I spend a lot more time on the go than I realized, toting and driving my kids around. I had no idea actually how much time of my day that was taking up. So those days when I was like, what the heck am I doing? Where is my time going? A lot of it was going to that more than I realized. Miscellaneous projects, and then family errands. So those are some of the things that I was tracking. The other app that I love using is an app called Habit. So it's not actually about tracking your time, but it is about creating, I'm going to bring this up really quickly, getting clear on what you want to be doing every single day, or at least a few times a week. And so each time you do one of those, you'll just tap it and a little celebration happens. Confetti pops up on the screen of your device. And so things that I have been focusing on is starting my day with God and gratitude, throughout my day, doing some form of meditation, soul work, or energy work, moving my body. There it is again, getting sunshine, tracking my macros. And then one big thing that I teach inside of business is this formula known as show up, serve, and sell. So those are things that I want to be doing every single day. When I do those things every single day, it really truly moves the needle forward. It's when I feel the best. It's also when I create the best results inside of my life and inside of my business. So those are two apps that I'm going to be using. One thing that I'm also going to be doing, I was not as consistent with this year as I would have liked to be. And again, it's a night and day difference when I do this versus when I don't. And if you are not already doing this, I cannot recommend this enough. So I'm curious how many of you are like me, like master list makers. I love my Okay, some of us are not. I'm a master list maker. I've got my paper planner, I've got Google Docs, I've got my notes app. I'm a big fan of the old school Post-it. And so what I would notice is a lot of the things on my to-do list, which I like to call my ta-da list because it's just way more fun and our language creates our reality. So I literally have written out on Post-its and my notes app in my phone. It's called my ta-da list. What I've done is I've looked at my to-do list, and then at the beginning of each week, I ask myself, where am I actually creating time to do these things? Because one of the things that I don't love is multiple days and maybe even weeks going by, and things on my list of things that I want to get done are not getting complete. That feeling has me start to slip back into that time scarcity and feeling the heaviness of the things that seem to matter are not actually happening. And so I actually just did this today, and it was so helpful taking my to-do list and literally creating blocks of time on my calendar that are labeled with the tasks that I want to do during those times. This has been a total game changer. I cannot tell you how many clients have come to me this year with their own struggles around time management. A lot of them, not all of them, but many of them are moms. Many of them are business owners. Many of them feel like what it is that they need to do every day far exceeds what they can actually complete. And so, yes, there's a level of are we being realistic with what we can actually get done? Are we, are we holding like reasonable expectations of ourselves and giving ourselves grace where needed? But there could also be some tweaks that need to happen around our calendar. So those are ways that I'm going to be more intentional with my time. The other thing, curious how many of you feel this way. I was on a good roll many years with having a goal of reading more. I feel like after high school and college, which was many, many years ago, I actually just visited my alma mater, which was San Diego State. I graduated there in 2009, which is insane that that was so long ago. Um, but because of high school and college, and honestly being forced to read books that I didn't want to read, I feel like I went into my adult life with this aversion to reading. It was almost a way for me to rebel. But there's so much value in being someone who reads, who learns, and it doesn't have to be that you're reading to learn. Me actually falling in love with reading again was reading books that were fiction, that were stories, that were thrillers, that were novels about love. One of my favorite fiction authors is Leanne Moriarty. If you guys are familiar with Big Little Lies, it was an HBO special, and I was like, oh my gosh, this show was so good. I want to read the book. I read that book, and then I proceeded to read all of her books. So that's what got me falling back in love with reading again. So I feel like I'm in a good place with that. There's not that aversion or that rebelling towards picking up a book. But this past year, and honestly, since having my son almost 3 years ago, that was not something I felt like I could actually do. And I missed it a lot last year. I started a lot of books in true manifesting generator fashion, but I actually only finished one book cover to cover. And I didn't love that feeling. So next year, my goal is to read one book per month. I'm going to tell you what some of those are. I'm going to give myself permission. Reading some of these books is going to be on Audible. I do have an Audible membership. I count Audible books from start to finish as completing a book, as reading a book. Some people don't. I do. So this is going to be a blend of audiobooks and also physical books. When I read one versus Audible, like when I actually want to read, I'm a really big fan of physical books versus a device. One of the reasons is because I want my kids to have a memory of me reading an actual book with actual pages versus me sitting on the couch with what looks like an iPad. That just feels really important to me. I decided that a few years ago. I want them to have memories of mama reading her books. So, what's on my list of books to read this year? I have a couple of them stacked right here. One of the women inside of Energy Expansion Academy gifted me a book called Abundant Ever After by Kathy Heller, and I'm really excited to dive into that. I think Kathy has a couple of other books. I've never read them, but I really love her as a thought leader, as a speaker. She's an incredible teacher. So, what's on my list of books for the year? Abundant Ever After by Kathy, Worthy by Jamie Kern Lima. I bought that book a few years ago. I think actually it just came out last year, but I bought it right when it came out. I might have even pre-ordered it, and it's been sitting on my nightstand calling my name. So I'm actually going to crack that open. There's another book that I started reading, but I want to finish it in the new year. It's called 10x is Easier Than 2x. And this is really about growth of any kind. I'm excited to apply these principles to my business. As I was listening to it, I was already I was getting so inspired. And it was one of those books I actually started listening to 10x is Easier Than 2x on Audible, but I immediately bought the physical copy because I wanted to actually see the words with my eyes. I'm curious if any of you ever do that. Well, you start listening to a book and you're like, I actually want to hold this in my hands as well. There's another book called Good Energy by Dr. Casey Means. Although I like to say that I am the queen of energy expansion and mindset mastery, this is a different type of energy. It's about our metabolic health. And I think I'm 4 chapters in. I've got way more to go, but this book was blowing my mind. The connection between almost every kind of disease and our gut and our metabolism. And I've like chills right now. I was just like jaw drop, mind blown, taking pictures. I was driving, so I had to do this very discreetly and quickly, but I was taking pictures of the chapter titles. Friends, this is a doctor, and chapter number 4 is Don't Trust Your Doctor. And I'm like, this is a message that needs to go out to everybody. It's about trusting yourself and your intuition and remembering that you are a whole being. And it flips the way that we look at and understand health like on its head. So, obviously, I'm excited about that. There's another book that I'm super excited. There's a series known as The Go Givers. Really beautiful book, but there's specifically one that I want to read, and it's Go Givers Sell More. Becoming a master marketer, I can't believe I'm saying these words out loud, is something that I actually really want to prioritize. And so, reading books about heart-centered sales and marketing, this is something I've taught. I believe I teach it really, really well, but I want to take this to the next level. And I want this to be a skill that I master in the new year. So, Go Givers Sell More is on the list. We Should All Be Millionaires by Rachel Rogers. I have come back to this book on my Audible. I'll listen to it like a chapter a year. And every time I listen to a chapter, I'm like 3 chapters in the last 3 years, I'm like, oh my goodness, why don't I just finish this dang book? So I'm going to complete that book. And then I want to do a book club with my husband. A few years ago, we started reading The 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work. And I'm like the look of shame here. Don't look at me. He was all about it. It was my suggestion. I bought this kit and this workbook and these conversation cards, and I bought us each a copy of the book. And he was fired up about it. And we started it, but I got busy and I stopped reading it. And so we sort of fell off, and it was mostly my fault because he was all about it. So I want to pick that book back up. I want to finish that with him. And there's another book about different attachment styles, understanding your own attachment style, and then also understanding your partner's attachment style is huge. And I want us to learn that together and have conversations. So, one of the best books to learn about this is literally called Attached. And so, I want to go through that together. And speaking of that, the other thing, this is not about a book I want to read, but one other thing I'm prioritizing is I feel like my husband and I have unintentionally, and I think you all get this, we have put our marriage on the back burner a little bit, not by choice, not on purpose, but life gets busy. We made some big moves. We've got 3 kids. We have a lot to manage, a lot happening in our heads and in our hearts and in our professional lives. And so at the end of the day, it just started to feel this year like there wasn't really enough time left for us to give each other. And that created some wedges between us. I feel like, I had mentioned at the beginning that this past year was a really hard year for me. And I think part of that was we had some of the biggest, toughest conversations as a married couple this year than we were going into our 14th year of marriage in 13 years. This was hands down even harder than year 7. The 7-year itch, if you know, it is real. This year was harder than that. And I'm so grateful that we're in a really great place, and making sure that we continue to prioritize each other is a really big deal. So there's that. A couple of other books that I want to reread, and I'm going to share these with you because I've been asked 3 times in less than 2 weeks what my book recommendations are. So, really quickly, before we go into the next component, is The Big Leap. If you have not read or listened to The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks, please let that be one of the first books or one of the books that you dive into in this next year. The Big Leap is a book. It doesn't matter if you're an entrepreneur or not. I'm like begging my husband to read it. He won't actually read it, and he doesn't like the narrator's voice. So we're at like a sticking point there. But so many of the concepts that I teach and I practice, I actually learned in that book. And it's not a dense book. It's a very easy book to consume. So I want to revisit that. if you are somebody, not all of you are, but I know I attract a lot of people who are in the coaching field, service-based businesses, teaching and healing spaces. There is a book called The Prosperous Coach by Rich Litvin and Steve Chandler. If you are in any field of coaching or even a heart-centered service provider, this book teaches you the simplest, most potent strategies for building a heart-centered practice, a heart-centered business. And the thing that I love about this is all of the strategies that they teach are timeless. They are things that they're not trendy. They will not go out of style. They will always work. They're about you being a better communicator and you being the best service provider you absolutely can. It's incredible. So I wanted to share that. A couple of the other must reads is if you are somebody who's wanting to prioritize money mindset. I know that that's the case for several of my people. Secrets of the Millionaire Mind is a must. Secrets of the Millionaire Mind. So I've read many books at this point on money mindset. Secrets of the Millionaire Mind by T. Harv Eker to this day is hands down my favorite. Hands down my favorite. If you've read that one and you want other books about money mindset, let me know and I can steer you in other directions. A few other nonfiction books that are less like self-help, but more like inspirational and feel good is Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. I love me some Big Magic. I reference that book a lot. And also Untamed by Glennon Doyle. I just really love Glennon's the way that she writes. So I will share this list. And if you are listening and you're inside of any of my programs, I've got this list ready to go. It was easy for me to rattle off. And I also have a link that I can share with this podcast recording that has a list of all of these, as well as some of my other favorites. So we're being more intentional with our time. We're reading more, at least I am. Maybe you will, maybe you won't. One other thing, there's just a few more things on this list because as you can see, one of the things that we're talking about here is I'm going to go into this now. I'm just going to bump it up early. I'm not going to be focusing on a lot of things. I'm going to be focusing on a few things and then going really deep with those things. I feel like there's a saying, and it goes something like most people overestimate what they can do in 1 year, but underestimate what they can do in 5 years. And I think that doesn't mean you can't do a lot. You can absolutely do a ton and you can create magic and miracles that blow your freaking mind over this next year. But I think I have this tendency, the way that I'm wired is I try to do way too many things. I try to put my attention and my energy on way more than what's helpful. And so that is what I would energetically call going wide. And then what happens when you go wide? You're stretched thin. Your bandwidth gets really tight. And so this year, I really want to be intentional about focusing on fewer things, but going really deep with those things. I'm really excited to give this a go. So, where this is leading me is I want to celebrate more. If you are not regularly celebrating the shit out of yourself in your personal life and your professional life, please, you don't have to listen to anything else I said. Just do this with me. I feel like I'm going to add, not, I feel like I am going to, because I don't do it enough. I'm going to add a practice of weekly celebrations, like actually putting on my calendar at least 10 minutes every Friday to take some time to celebrate myself in my personal life and also in my professional life. Really looking at even the teeniest, tiniest things. What did we do? What was accomplished? What did we experience? Where do we want to put that energy? I feel like one of the things that really helped me move through the beginning months of this past year, which were really hard, was this simple mantra of when you focus on the good gets better. I think there's this thing that happens when life gets really hard. We can get fixated on this is hard and this is a struggle. And why does it have to be like this? Even as the Mindset Mastery Queen, I started to notice that where my focus was not super helpful. yes, there's the importance of acknowledging where you're at and where you've been through and what life is revealing to you. But there are moments where we have to be really intentional, and we are the only ones who can pull our mindset up out of the trenches to refocus on what's actually going to get us where we want to go. And I think part of why this year felt really hard was because I was really hard on myself. I was way harder on myself than, again, what was helpful or supportive. And I know one thing that's going to shift that is celebrating more, celebrating myself in private and also celebrating myself publicly as a brand, as a thought leader. Going back to my word for the year of 2025, again, my theme is own it. One other thing as a business owner that I'm really excited about doing is I'm curious how many of you are business owners, specifically service providers, and you feel like you have a hard time sharing your magic. Does that land? So, what I mean by this is I feel like there's a magic that gets created behind the paywall of my business, like inside of the groups that I lead and inside of the one-on-one sessions that I get to facilitate. And then I'll go to grab my phone and share it on Instagram. And I don't know how to translate that fully. And so sometimes I don't. So, one thing that I've felt inspired to do that I really want to go all in with over the next year is to really, and this is where it comes into going deep. So, not getting off of a coaching session, a breakthrough session, then rushing to the next thing. But after everything I lead, really sitting with what was the key takeaway? What did that person want? How did I help them get there? And then, without ever disclosing my client's personal information, taking a minute to go on and either type up a little description of that or share my face and my voice to talk about that, to bring people into the transformation in real time while I myself am already energetically in it. So that's also what Celebrate is going to look like. One of the ways I'm going to do that. And I'm going to continue using, we're going to go into systems and apps. I run my business on an app called Kajabi. I love it. I'm going to keep using that. I want to explore more systems that will allow me to automate things in my personal and my professional life. All the automation, all the delegation, the things that you find yourself doing on repeat, is there a way for you to not have to be that person doing those things with your own two hands again and again and again? Zoom is a really big part of my business. It's how I'm making this happen. So I'm going to keep using that. And I'm a big fan of everything G Suite. This is not an ad for Google, but I use outside of Kajabi. I'm in my Gmail is up all day, every day. I use Google Docs personally and professionally. I use Google Forms inside of my business. All of these things come with my uh, G Suite business account, which I think is $6 a month. It's like teeny tiny. And then Google Sheets. I have a master plan that I have pinned to the very top of my browser all day, every day with some of the key metrics specifically for my business. So I'm excited about that. And I'm also going to be continuing a practice that I dove into this year was writing daily love letters and reading a daily devotional. I have tried lots of different devotionals. The one that I'm using right now is hands down my favorite. It is called Unshakable. So beautiful. It's by Christine Kane. It says 365 devotions for finding unwavering strength in God's word. I'm super pumped about this as we head into the new year because I got this book just 3 or 4 months ago. And so I'm really excited to start a brand new year from scratch. So those two practices, today is day 140 out of 365 days of combining this practice of writing a daily love letter and then also journaling doing the journaling and then reading the daily devotional. I always do those two things together. So that has been wildly impactful for me. I'm really excited about that. And those are things that I'm going to be taking into the new year and things that I feel really good and really solid are going to support me in not only creating and accomplishing what I desire, but even more importantly, feeling how I desire. feeling how I desire. The last thing I want to say and why I emphasized feeling how I desire is because whether you realize it or not, the reason that we take steps towards achieving anything or set any goals, a lot of people don't realize this, is because we think it's going to help us feel a certain way. But a lot of people, if you're not conscious of that, then you're setting goals from a place of expectation or looking at people around you or trying to prove something. And sadly, and I have a feeling, I mean, I'll be the first to raise my hand. I have experience with this. Let me know, give me a nod, give me a little comment somewhere on social media if you can relate. That experience of checking the boxes and accomplishing the things you thought you were supposed to and then really not feeling that great or feeling empty or just like bulldozing on to the next thing. And so there's a concept that I love to teach and I love to practice. And this is not my concept, it's from one of my favorite thought leaders. Her name is Danielle Laporte, but she talks about setting goals with soul. Setting goals with soul is before you create any goals list, make a list of how you desire to feel over the coming month or, in this case, over the next year. And then once you know how you want to feel, you get to ask yourself, what is going to help me feel that way? And maybe it is your goals. Maybe there are certain material things that would really help you tap into new levels of expansion. Whatever it is that you desire, they're going to help you own it or whatever your theme is for the year. And so create a life. My wish for you over this next year is that you create a life that feels as good as it looks. Because I know a lot of us can make things look really good on the surface. I know I had to dabble with that a little bit just to, kind of survive some of the early months of this year. But can you create a life that feels as good as it looks? I love you all so much. Thank you for tuning in. I'd love to hear from you on the socials. Send me a message. Let me know what resonated for you, and we will see you next time.